Welcome back, everybody. Today we're discussing Westworld Season 3, Episode 1, Parce Domine. Now, before we start overthinking an HBO show about robots and pulling at every visible thread until only more threads come out, let's just acknowledge how awesome it is to be watching the show again. The first episode was a solid start. Bernard is looking as dashing as ever, same with Dolores, and Caleb is an emotionally compromised character with a north-ish pointing moral compass, all markings of a great character, and I am entirely here for it. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing to show your support and, of course, be notified whenever new videos come out. We will be here covering the entire Westworld Season 3, doing breakdowns, theory videos, so on and so forth. We also have an active community on Discord, Twitter, and Patreon. If you consider joining any of those, please use the links in the description below. But let's dive in. So the first thing to discuss is the name. It's Parce Domine, Latin for spare Lord. It's a start of a Roman Catholic hymn detailing spare Lord, spare your people, be not angry with us forever. My take is that it's a plea to Dolores not to be angry with humanity forever, to forgive the innocents that had nothing to do with the workings of the 1% that were actually able to attend the park, which I think ties in perfectly to the start of this episode, and that was Dolores, the vengeful god getting herself settled into this new world. Actually, before that, we do have a short clip of the white cyclical cloud infogram showing the divergence in China with an arc of 2.39 seconds. The coordinates of the focal point it shows don't really lead to anything currently, but as I discussed in a previous video, now linked above, I think this is the machine, which we later learn is the Rehoboam. I believe I said that right. And I speculate the divergences are when it cannot correctly calculate what would happen. It's when the machine gets it wrong, or when someone diverges from a path that it believed that they would take. Overall meaning the machine messes up, and this chart measures that, because it could also apply to the grander plan for humanity, such as this machine is the strategy engine for perfect symbiosis living. Again, something diverges, threatening that future peace, and thus it needs to be tracked on this chart. The only thing I really can't explain is the 2.39 arc seconds. I theorize that maybe it's telling us that someone diverged for 2.39 seconds, creating an arc, from that plan and then going back to the calculated path, like it's going off course and then course corrects. But I digress. The scene opens to an unknown figure, controlling, violent, and married. He tries to sell his position in Delos, seeing news of humans killed in Westworld and the horror stories of the slaughter leaking to the rest of the world. He, like many others, tries to panic sell during a crisis, and this causes the stock to plummet. Only he can't sell because so many others are ahead of him currently, meaning that he may be getting much less return once he's finally at the front of the line. He is outraged and says that he pays so that he doesn't have to wait in line, and dismisses the hologram by taking off his glasses, and it reveals this logo. We later learn that this logo is the Insight logo. It also probably points to Rehoboam as well, meaning he may be paying for their predictive strategy planning in regards to trading, which, man, I imagine this leads to a vastly unfair advantage that, of course, until every single person realizes it and that advantage becomes the norm, would create a huge gap between who has it and who doesn't. It would mean diminishing returns for the lower classes that couldn't afford this service. It would be impossible to trade against them, and the rich would get richer until, well, maybe I'm getting too far ahead of myself. He takes some neat dreaming pills that look like circuit boards, probably dissolving in your mouth as you sleep. I imagine it pairs with this tablet, and this is essentially what they believe white noise will be for the rich and powerful. Neat concept. Dolores hacks the house and takes a nice naked swim in his pool. He wakes up, finds her, and she lets him know exactly why she's there. Years ago, he was a patron at Westworld, abusing her as a part of his bachelor party. She admits that she doesn't want to hurt him unless she needs to, and this signals a change from the person that we saw in Season 2, a change that I most eagerly welcome. She reveals that she read his book and zip ties these glasses to his face, programming them to show the death of his first wife, a great nightmare-fueled event that he would have remembered forever until he tripped and died himself. Dolores was there for money and the files from Insight. It's not explicitly stated, but I imagine it's telling us the story of how she figured out who Liam Dempsey was as the son of the creator of Rehoboam. We next see Caleb waking up, the first time in this exact manner. He does this throughout throughout the episode, showing how loop-like the humans' lives really are. Throughout the episode, he also has a voiceover from someone named Francis. This was an old friend of his, someone he served in the military with, and because we later learned that he died, this is some form of catharsis, though throughout the episode, we see him rejecting those calls. Caleb works a pretty normal job, running fiber optic cable, and we learn the world is now run by algorithms. It has scores for everything, and again, I think this is Rehoboam, that they perhaps allowed companies to purchase their strategy planning. During the call later on, this term is used, and it gives me the impression that this is maybe a department that all job sites have, like the new HR department. Strategy planning is a critical role because it lets you hire people perfect for that role, people that would be content in their job and efficient. The reason Caleb isn't getting those jobs is because he would be neither of those. So the question naturally becomes why? And I think it's showing us this broken character, battling mental health issues, and it's causing this lowered place in society, needing to turn to crime because a systematic issue exists. I think this paired with him rejecting the calls from this machine shows a subtle hatred for automation and maybe technology across the board. He resents it in some kind of way. I know I'm getting ahead of myself here, but this episode introduces one of the most complex characters in such a short period of time, and I think it's incredibly well done and incredibly worth noting. He resents his low scores because, like William, he did something great in another world. He did something in the world of the military, and now returns to find rejection and low marks defining him like so many of our veterans do now. We learn he turned his implant off, and assuming this is the insight augmentation, it's referred to as something that could smooth some of the rough edges off. We theorized in an earlier video on the automation of self, something that you could enable and traverse as a kind of autopilot to course correct when needed, a strategy planning for yourself to make sure you're doing what needs to be done, kind of give the reins to someone else, potentially. Francis telling him this could be saying, hey, simply turn it back on now and make sure you're on the right track. It's also important to note that assuming capitalism still runs the world, it's probably the automated system also trying to ensure its own continued use. Like, hey, I'm reminding you to turn your service back on. We meet his mother, who eats a deep and dream-filled slumber tablet. She then says that he isn't her son, and man, what a truly nightmare scenario for him, while he pays the bills and keeps her in the best care that he can afford. So he works the night shift, which is Rico, another scoring system in his life that ensures he is an integral worker, but this time for high crime. People can post jobs, and from this list, it looks like anything from escort missions to murder. Now, I first thought that this was going to be the park interface or guide, a Teddy-like equivalent that was, just another park, but it appears that this is some kind of blockchain technology that works perfectly in the future, and they operate openly. An Uber score dictates if they can do the job and with who, and that will go up or down depending on the jobs that they do. Like his good guy, white hat, everyday persona, his black hat, underground lawbreaker side also has low marks. An underachiever, but his dark side is by choice. It doesn't seem like he does personals, loosely defined as murder, kidnapping, torture, anything to another human. Meaning the worst things that give the best rewards and reputation, he opts out of. He takes on a new mission, he grabs the goods on the train, and meets Ashes to Ashes and Giggles 24. We know whose name is who because Marshawn Lynch is a football player who wears the number 24, plus this badass would never call herself Giggles. But it does show that she is level 24 and has a 4.5 star rating, and he is level 15 with a 4.3 star rating. The level likely correlates to experience and willingness to do tougher jobs, and the rating is likely the peer review so that others know if you're good or not, regardless of if you've done thousands of jobs in the past. It is great attention to detail and game theory. Ash here uses tech to knock out cameras and trackers, explaining why in the trailer they blow up the ATM in clear view of cameras. Also, this mood shirt, I want this. Whatever this is, make it happen. We also see his screen name as they flee from the police. He has a score of 3.2 stars and is level 7. My best understanding of this nickname is nickel and dimed, like he's been cheated, which aligns to his character quite well, but it also kind of seems a little whiny. Like, this is a gangster app where you come to do crime. Name yourself Big Dick Thug Killer 69 like everybody else. We next come to Charlotte Hale running Delos like a boss, and the company is panicked. They aren't happy. They are worried about losing everything because of the PR from the parks, and they want to shut the parks down to save face. Hale doesn't want this for whatever reason, and really the only thing I can think of is when it's running, it's an effective source of hosts that could someday be set free and help her undo humanity. Someone is absent from this meeting, and I think it's safe to assume it's William, and for whatever reason has a machine sitting in their place that agrees with Charlotte to take the company private now that the stock is at an all-time low. But because this is a machine sitting here, it leaves open the possibility of hacking and this not actually being, the correct move for the company. Also note that the machine has an interesting circle with some dots coming off of it, possibly pointing to this also being run as a strategy engine, such as Insight, which, would make sense if you're plotting the future of a company. We next learned that they have scapegoated Bernard Lowe, who was known in the company as the head of programming, with multiple engineers, if alive, of course, could state that he ignored their concerns with the newest update that led to everything that we saw. Bernard is working as a butcher, an interesting fall from grace when you consider Felix wanted to be in programming and considered himself a butcher when working with Sylvester. He is living under a false identity, Armand Delgado, which is an anagram for damaged Arnold. He is living a remote life undercover, trying not to be found, but craves more information about the world that views him as a villain. He then goes back home and runs self-diagnostic. He presses a button to adjust his settings after each question, which is super interesting to me, and how hosts choose to live their lives, right? Because Maeve showed us that you can boost bulk apperception and everything worked fine, but Bernard here is his own person, and editing your code, even if you could make yourself a better you, could take away or outright remove who you genuinely are as a host. He is pressing this button to remove emotion, to be clear, level-headed, and ensure that no one is messing with his code and then instructing him to lie about it. Because Elsie brought up a really good point, and maybe it was a little misdirected at Ford at the time, but she said, how could you ever know if you were the real you? I think him choosing not to edit his code and use this tool that allows him to briefly switch it on and off is a great medium to maintain identity and maybe his fidelity as a being, as a host, making sure that someone isn't erasing his memories like Ford did countless times before, and he isn't hurting people that he shouldn't be hurting. It's been 92 days since him and Dolores last spoke. Assuming that this was at Arnold's house, we have a big chunk of time that needs to be filled in. I imagine we'll get a scene explaining how he got here, and maybe explaining how he becomes the scapegoat in Dolores's master plan. We get another white ring shot showing elevated scrutiny in London, UREW. I imagine this is the United Republic of England and Wales, meaning, the future has some interesting things for the English monarchy. The elevated scrutiny line I find fascinating. I think it's maybe more people in this region are finding issue with their lives being controlled by a machine, and as such, they need to account for this, make sure that they get back on the right track before this blows out of proportion. How the machine handles this will speak volumes, because I have to imagine the programmers made some kind of self-preservation for this machine, at least in some capacity, and that could be anything from, sending, presents to make sure everyone is happy, or sending soldiers. Now, Dolores meets with Liam Dempsey, before this point having built a relationship with him under the guise of manipulating him to get access to Rehoboam. We learn that he's being celebrated for saving the world through algorithms. In my trailer breakdowns, I crafted a more closed-off system, something that was built for the service of one company to make them trillions with predictive capability. And while this is still very likely to be happening behind the scenes, it kind of appears that everyone knows about this, and again is maybe used at other companies or purchased by people directly. I still believe the people purchasing this are just feeding the beast more information, spreading like a virus masked as good credit and a happy life while it milks your collective data for profit, but we'll see. At this point in time, it is a month into their relationship. Then we get a line about this being a simulation in a simulation. And well, I'm not going to touch that at all. The scene ends when Liam has a meeting come up and wants Dolores to take off a couple days, cruising from Ensenada to LA. She says that she has friends there, but I'm not sure if that's deception to sell her fake life further, or maybe someone that we have yet to meet. We come back to Caleb interviewing for better jobs, only to find defeat. He meets with a therapist, and this is when we learn the voice that he's hearing is a part of his therapy, an automated task because the in-person therapist has other patients. It appears to be a VA doctor, which probably sucks just as bad in the future. Caleb has an interesting line about both of them being monitored, himself and Francis, while they were in the program. Perhaps as a line in the fine print of your military service, it collects data on your comrades while they collect data on you. And now that he's gone, they're able to, program speech and thought and give the impersonation of Francis, kind of like how if someone wanted, they could find patterns in my speech here, and granted that I had enough varied words on the internet, they could have me talk or, say whatever they wanted me to say. I'm thinking he served in the Second Russian Civil War, but, it could be any war because this appeared in the trailer and we get a shot of Russian as he runs out here, meaning that we will likely see two timelines unfold as we learn what happened to Francis. Now we come back to Dolores and Liam talking about Rehoboam. I have reasons to believe this and Project Solomon are the same thing, or a natural progression of AI. King Solomon was the uniter of kingdoms of Israel and Judah, had a son named Rehoboam, and accounts show that he was less kind than his father, meaning like symbolically this project could have started with a good, genuine intention, but became something much different as the updates came out. It evolved into maybe its own thing. Liam's father, the creator of this, started with the goal of creating a path for everyone, making the world a better place because we could all fully realize our potential. We learned it took 15 years to build, and they have lost track of certain operating information after this last update. Again, speaking to this switch in Project Solomon to Rehoboam. They state that they have lost track of the number of strategies it is serving to the world, which is both impossible and highly ominous. They go off and they meet this person named Martel, who states that someone inside the company is trying to get access to Rehoboam. The conversation turns south, threats of death are made, and potentially the person she works for having a shared interest in Delos. And I mean, if it's going to be anything, I don't think it's hosts. I think it's the immortality project that they were trying to create in the park. Bernard gets exposed. He flips the switch and beats up the two nosy guys looking to make a quick buck. During this, he reveals that something is coming for them and that he doesn't know how to stop it yet. I think it's safe to assume Dolores. Caleb gets rejected by the company he applied for, learns that the voice on the other end of the line is a bot, and defeatedly turns back to Rico. Dolores tries to get information from Liam, but realizes that he is just a figurehead. After his dad died, he was locked out by his dad's partner, someone named Sirac. She pushes him for the name of this original architect, but is exposed by Martin before that information is revealed. He broke into her phone and found a conversation with someone using a private IPv4 address. I'm not explaining why this is weird, but it's far in the future. I don't think these addresses would be used anymore. Also, the fact that it took 4 minutes to crack makes me think that she picked a weak, easily crackable password so that he would know for this meeting. The text message conversation notes luring Liam to an underpass on the east side. Martin takes the bait and they are en route to this location to expose the whole operation, helping her target Liam. Caleb is tasked with bringing a car and a box of drugs to the people about to kill her. Someone is about to shoot him in the head, and we learn that this isn't the first time he has been shot in the head, meaning that he has survived some serious wounds during his call of duty. But since this is the future, I have to imagine more. Like maybe he was rebuilt in some capacity because of this damage, and that's why he's having some issues. But that's entirely speculation. The hired help take off with Dolores, and Caleb finally answers the call from Francis. Martin and the rest of the team waits for someone to show up and end up trying to kill Dolores with the drugs as a mystery car arrives. Dolores breaks free and kills all but Martin, who escapes. Caleb talks with Francis, after which the system messes up and misspeaks. We learn that Francis never made it back to the real world, but it does remind him of the real words that his late pal said to him, that they needed to have their own plan. He cancels the service and begins searching for something real. Dolores tracks Martin down, killing him and replacing him with a host of her own in his image, but before he dies, he reveals the name Sirac. His final words leave a haunting message that Sirac is probably already looking for her, and I'm not sure who is in this host body. One of the pearls, I imagine, but it could also be someone that she rebuilt from memory, or just, a basic host that does her bidding. Dolores fights 3 hired guns and gets badly injured, finding Caleb at the end of the tunnel, looking to lend a helping hand. She's comforted by Caleb as the screen fades to black, and a desperate Bernard seeks passage to Westworld, looking for a friend that can help him. I think it's safe to assume Maeve, though Stubbs may also be on this path. If you didn't watch the after credit scene, pause the video now please, and and do so now. But it simply showed us Maeve reset and back in a new narrative, this time a Nazi-controlled territory about to wreck shop. I imagine that she's here thanks to Felix and Sylvester, and that she is very much still the conscious version of herself. Wow. What an episode. I'm quite happy with this explosive start. The fight at the end was incredible, though I hope that Dolores boosts her ability to aim at some point. I mean, running up and kicking the shit out of people is going to work, but only for so long. But with that, we do come to the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to sound off in the comments below. Equally, if I left anything out, please let me know. Thank you to all the wonderful new subscribers that have come along this season. I'm so glad that you're here. A special thank you to Micheal, Linck, Robert Holtz, Logan, and Jeff Chunn, this month's highest tier donors on Patreon, which is the best way to support this channel. I may be doing another video this week should a particular theory strike. Let me know if something is on your mind, and I may cover that as well. Otherwise, much love, everybody, and I can't wait to talk to you all again soon.